Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. This is your tutor doctor from DB Tuitions. Now in this video series I will be solving the June 2024 AQA GCSE Biology Higher Tier Paper 1. This paper has got 8 questions and I will be making 8 separate videos. Each one is dedicated to one full exam question, broken down exactly according to the official mark scheme. Now, all my fams, you can watch these videos or simply listen to them like an audio podcast while revising. Now, this video will help you understand how marks are actually awarded, not just what the correct answer is. And if any parents, if you are tuning in to support your child or correcting the papers with them or going through the mark scheme, this series will help you understand where marks are gained or lost so you can guide them better. Now, if you haven't already, a sincere request, please do like, subscribe, and do share our channel to whichever students are in need or to the parents. And also please turn on notifications because over the next couple of months, I will be solving most of the biology, chemistry, physics, and maths papers along with the gold exam tips, revision strategies, and common examiner traps. Now, I would also strongly recommend watching my 5-point revision plan video because that explains how you should be using the paper walkthroughs effectively. Now, let's start with question 1. Now, a tip here, even before reading the question, I will always eyeball 2 things. Quickly, how many marks is this question for? Now, question 1.1 is for 1 mark. So I know that roughly whatever the marks are. So a 1 mark question would probably require you to answer in a word or a couple of words or a maximum of 1 sentence. And as we can clearly see, this is a multiple choice question, an MCQ. Now let's read this question. A person has coronary heart disease. Which blood vessels are affected by coronary heart disease? Now, coronary heart disease affects the coronary arteries. Now, whenever you travel in an aeroplane, they do explain you that if the cabin gets depressurized and goes low on oxygen, the mask will be deployed. Please help yourself before you help others put their mask on. That's exactly valid to the heart. The heart has to supply itself oxygen through coronary arteries, then the heart muscle able to function fully. Therefore, capillaries and veins are not the right answer. Therefore, arteries is the correct answer. So, tick the correct box, that is the arteries. Now, let's go on to question 1.2. This is for 2 marks. And you can see that another thing, as I said, 2 things I would observe is first the marks. I know that it is for a 2-marker question, maybe a couple of sentences needed, and the key question word explain. So it is asking me to explain. So I have to go in detail whatever the question is. So there is some data given here. I need to read that. A person's heart stops beating. So that's simply nothing but a cardiac arrest, where arrest is to stop. The heart has stopped beating and the person has stopped breathing. The first data pushes down on the person's chest, and pushing down on the person's chest is putting pressure on the heart. And this is known as CPR, cardiopulmonary resuscitation. Now, why does pressing on the chest help? So I'm sure that many of you have visited a burger joint or McDonald's, or you have served yourself ketchup from squeezy bottles from restaurants. What happens when you cannot get the ketchup out of that squeezy bottle? You try and squeeze on it hard. Similarly, when the heart stops, the heart is not able to pump oxygenated blood around anymore. The blood has stopped. So oxygen is not getting around the body. So the mark scheme wants you to identify 2 points here. 1 is pushing or trying to move the blood around. So by pressing down on the chest, you're trying to push and move the blood, and thereby you're getting around the oxygen to get oxygen around the body. So heart stops, blood circulation stops. The chest compressions force the blood to move, and the blood is carrying oxygen to vital organs like brain. Now, common mistakes here, please don't say it restarts the heart. This idea is clearly ignored by the examiners. It does not restart the heart. It does not get oxygen to the lungs. There's no reference to lungs needed at all here. Now, let's move on to question 1.3. Reading the question, and again, eyeballing the mark is just a one marker, one word, couple of words, or one sentence. The first aider also forces air into the person's lungs by blowing into their mouth. Describe how forcing air into the person's lungs helps the person. Now, what is the idea behind this? So if the person is not breathing, if the person's blood is not moving around, as you have seen in the previous question, they are not getting the required oxygen. So to provide oxygen to help the person breathe, for 1 mark, the correct answer would be providing oxygen for respiration. So once again, providing oxygen for respiration. Now, for aerobic respiration to happen in the body, which is important because the metabolic chemical reactions in the body, they release energy within the cells via aerobic respiration, and oxygen is an important reactant in that chemical reaction, and it is very much needed so the cells can function properly. Now, moving on to 1.4. Now, reading the question, the person's heart starts to beat again and the person starts breathing. The person has a high level of cholesterol in their blood. Name one type of drug that will decrease the level of cholesterol in the person's blood. Again, this is a 1 marker. Now, this is what I call factual recall. This, there's no concept behind this as such, but this is definitely the information you need to know. Now, the class of drugs which are used to lower cholesterol are called statins. They are specific drugs like atorvastatin, rosuvastatin. You can either name the specific one, but just naming statins is more than enough. Statins work by lowering the blood cholesterol levels, and they reduce the risk. They do not completely stop the artery blockage. They reduce the risk of artery blockage. Well done so far if you've got all of them right. Now let's move on to question 1.5. A doctor decides that the person needs to have a stent fitted. Explain how a stent works to treat coronary heart disease. Now again, the key word explain, and we can see this is for 2 marks. So we're looking at 2 points, very clear and to the point. Now, a stent physically widens a narrowed artery and it keeps it open, allowing more blood and oxygen and glucose to reach the heart muscle cells so the heart muscle cells can function. Now, as an examiner, I have seen many students write unblocks the vessel. So roughly, it does do that job, but this is a very too vague of an answer, and please don't write such type of vague answers which will cost you your marks. Now, please do remember using keywords here. So keywords such as stent will widen a narrowed artery. So that's a phrase you can use here. And also, once the artery is, widened, which was narrowed or blocked before, it will allow more blood, and it will also allow oxygen and glucose to reach the heart muscle cells for their optimum function. So within 2 sentences, you have given the excellent answer. Very well done. Now let's move on, and I can see that there's a table of data given. Now question 1.6, it is for 2 marks, and it is very specifically asking me for 2 conclusions. Now always do remember, whenever you're given a table of data, especially in this case, please go ahead and eyeball the data, look at it, and form an opinion on it. Now, they're given 2 columns, and they're asking me to do conclusion from a table of data. So I have to give something called as comparative statements. Now, when I'm giving these comparative statements, it is always good to use the numerical data listed in here. Now, this cardiovascular disease, they haven't actually named. It says the table 1 is showing the effect of smoking on the risk of developing different cardiovascular diseases. So I've just named the diseases as E, F, G, and H, and the corresponding percentage of increase in risk compared to people who have never smoked. So basically, people who have never smoked and people who have smoked, how they have an increased risk of getting that cardiovascular disease. That's what the table is telling. Now, looking at it, for disease E, it is 14%, disease F, it is 20%, and disease G, it is 29%, and disease H, it is 70%. Now, any 2 correct comparative statements, for example, you can see consistently smoking is increasing the risk of all the cardiovascular diseases here across the board. And then the risk is highest, as you can see, for disease H, and it is lowest for disease E. So being a data interpretation question, you must compare, not just write, okay, smoking is bad. Of course, smoking is bad and can cause many, many diseases, but your answer has to be specific to the question. So give 2 conclusions that can be made. So we can say disease H has the highest risk, and we can say disease E has the lowest risk. And we can also mention that, as you can see, it is increasing risk for all the diseases. So smoking is a risk factor, and it is increasing the risk of disease for all cardiovascular diseases. Well done. Now let's go move on to question 1.7. Now here they've given you very specific instructions. This is a 4-marker. Now not every question will tell you, but here they've clearly told you what are these 4 marks for. They want you to label the y-axis, they want you to add the correct scale to the y-axis, and plot the data from table 1 and label each bar. Now let me tell you, when I have question 1 and then I have 8 sub-questions in question 1, let's say from 1.1 to 1.8, these are what we call nested question. So question 1.7, you might have to take data from the previous questions, as it is saying here that the bar for cardiovascular disease E has been plotted for you. So labeling the y-axis, adding the correct scale, plotting the data, and labeling each bar. So here is the data. So first thing is label the y-axis. Now, y-axis is always the dependent axis and x is independent. So from the table of data we have, cardiovascular diseases are not dependent on each other. So we are going to label them on the x-axis, and the percentage increase in risk compared to people who have never smoked, that is going to be our y-axis label. Now, For us to look at the y-axis scale, let's look at the figures here. They're ranging, a couple of them are 20 and 70, and rest are the numbers 14 and 29. So when we look here, the best thing to get in our range of percentages is minimum of a 14% to maximum of 70%. So what I would suggest is take the scale as 1 centimeter is 5%. You know that one block here, each of them is 1 centimeter. So again, because you're labeling the y-axis, you can label them starting from 0 as 0, 5, 10, 15, 20, and so on up until the 70%. Now, you have to plot the data correspondingly in terms of bar chart, which I'm sure, and make sure all bars are plotted to correct heights, and you're labeling all of them with the corresponding disease E, F, G, and H as it has been done for E. So if you can see roughly, E is at 14. So you can check here, E is at 14. Let's move on to the last sub-question in question number 1, the last one we will be reviewing in this video. Describe, it says describe one lifestyle factor that can increase the risk of cardiovascular disease. And again, this is for 1 mark. It very clearly says do not refer to smoking, because smoking has already been given as part of the question as a risk factor. Now, I am going to give you a few risk factors. Any of them is acceptable. Now, this is specifically for cardiovascular disease. 1 is poor diet. 2, lack of exercise or sedentary lifestyle. High alcohol intake. And high stress levels. Yeah? So these are the ones apart from smoking. Now, what I want to kind of emphasize here is obesity on its own is not accepted under the mark scheme as an acceptable lifestyle factor, because they are specifically asking you. So obesity is caused by the lifestyle factors I've listed. So obesity is a cause of these lifestyle factors, so that cannot be as an answer for 1.8. Now, question 1 is not difficult biology. It's exam technique, precision, and reading the data carefully. Most lost marks from cardiovascular topic come from vague wording, not lack of knowledge. Now, if you want, you can go and watch the part 2, that is the question 2 of this video. And if you like this video, please do like, share, and subscribe, and make sure you turn on the notifications. Thank you so much. Have a good day.